The Uncharted series for a time was the face of the PlayStation. One could argue that Nathan Drake has been since dethroned by the likes of Kratos, Spider-Man, Ellie, or Aloy, but few can deny the unprecedented success of the Uncharted franchise. Over the last year and a bit, I have been revisiting these games, and now that I've talked about all of them, including Golden Abyss, I'm gonna try and answer the question, what is the best Uncharted game? I'll be ranking them from worst to best considering the gameplay, story, presentation, puzzles, and I'll not be factoring in multiplayer as the remastered versions of the Nathan Drake games do not include them, and I imagine that will be the version those who have not experienced the games will start with. I'll be ranking all the games, and then after I'll rank some more minor things. With that said, let's not delay and begin the list. And feel free to tell me your list below. A list like this is entirely my opinion, and I'd love to know the reasons that you might agree or disagree. So without further ado, number 6, Uncharted Golden Abyss. I almost feel bad for calling this the worst Uncharted game. In a vacuum, it does many things right. The gameplay is relatively tight, and its set pieces, while held back due to its handheld state, are still impressive and fun. Actually, the fact we have a competent Uncharted game on a handheld is where a lot of the strengths lie. This is one of the better games for the Vita in my opinion, but it suffered like many first-party titles in that a handful of gimmicks were stuffed into this game, making the gameplay consistently tedious. You'll do everything through the swipe of a screen, combat, quick time events, boss fights, and it is never as fun as the game seems to think it is. The gunplay here is hindered by the system as its thumbsticks are terribly small, leading to plenty of inaccuracy, but the game never got too difficult to handle. The aforementioned final boss is probably one of the worst in the series, as it is a series of screen swipes, which even if done perfectly will take literal minutes to complete, and the entire chapter dedicated to swiping as a means of rowing a boat was simply boring, which is something Uncharted games do not achieve very often. The puzzles here were pretty good, better than Uncharted 1 for sure, but the reward for finding puzzles were, rather than fun skins or cheats, were cards for a mobile spin-off game, which made finding treasures pretty pointless. The story for this game took place before Drake's Fortune, which allowed it to go balls to the wall without impacting the lore too much. However, it feels even more disconnected as certain characters like Chase are forgotten about right after the credits roll. Perhaps this too is due to the lower budget, but I appreciated the more grounded story. It still had its fantastical elements, but no demons or ancient civilizations to speak of, which was refreshing. It helped keep the story as realistic as possible, or at least realistic by Uncharted standards. I'd say if you have a Vita, it's worth giving a try, but don't go buying a Vita just for this. Ultimately, this game is just fine. It has some upsides, some downsides, but they all come together to form a mediocre game. It's also tough to say if it's mediocre because of its individual facets or because it stands next to the mainline big budget entries, but I think few could argue that it comes close to any of the other entries, that is, barring our number 5 spot. But before we get into our next entry, I want to take a second to talk about today's sponsor, World of Warships. From the same people who brought you Batman Arkham Knight, I mean World of Tanks, comes a naval game on the oceanic frontier. With maps, classes, and ships as vast as the ocean, and gameplay that's easy to get sucked into, there's no better game to unwind with. This is a tactical MMO taking place on the high seas, where you'll be able to battle against other captains to try and sink their ships through overwhelming power and cunning strategy. You have hundreds of ships to choose from, and they all fit into their respective classes. It's also easier than ever to get started, because if you use the code WARSHIPS when beginning your journey, you'll get premium currency, premium content, and other bonuses to help you get started. Need I mention that this is free on consoles and is getting monthly new content updates? So if you want to try your hand at naval warfare, then download World of Warships today, and use code WARSHIPS when creating a new account, or click the link in the description and the pinned comment. And thank you again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Number 5, Uncharted Drake's Fortune. If I was ranking these games based on impact or importance, this would be much higher. But on its own, Drake's Fortune has aged horribly. Look, I know that times were different and I respect that, but compared to everything else in the series, time has been less than kind to this game. Its graphics are still good, but it lacks a memorable art direction, especially given that its goal at the time was presenting state-of-the-art graphics. Animations were motion captured, which is great, but some animations still feel a bit cartoonish. The gameplay here is as familiar as ever. You move from light platforming to basic cover shooting with a few set pieces in between. It's a loop that lacks a ton of variety, but entertains for the runtime. Perhaps variety isn't worth it, since when they do branch out, we get the infamous not one, but 2 jet ski segments that are the leading cause of male baldness. The shooting feels fine and the glitches are admittedly slim, and the game is still fun to revisit just to see where everything started. The set pieces here are basic in comparison to even the next game, and plenty of series trends were started here. Poor boss fights, the entire structure of the story, the treasures, the bonuses, and the guns all return down the line. What is here is a bit more small scale, especially when we look at the environment. Rarely do locales differ from forests and caves, and when they do in the case of the World War II bunkers, it is still moving through relatively bare color palettes. The supernatural enemies that accompany this new setting is a fun mix-up to the combat that requires you to, instead of shooting from behind cover, run and gun. The puzzles here are barely worthy of that title, as they often see you looking at your journal for the direct answer, removing any brain work. The largest problem with the first Uncharted, aside from its comparison to the other games, is that while the rest of the series had low points, this game had downright annoying parts. Moments I dreaded returning going to, and they arrived at such a consistent pace I found myself on a roller coaster of emotions. Said emotions being anger, followed by decompression and eventual irritation again. What doesn't help is the final boss. The very last moment of the game is a letdown. Many of these things were improved in this game's sequel, and even more so in Uncharted 3. I think my hottest take regarding this series is that Uncharted 2 and 3 sit very close together on this list, and while it was difficult to decide, I think you'll understand my decision. Number 4, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Comparisons have been made between Uncharted and the standard cinematic blockbuster, and I believe these comparisons are just, and there is no greater game that represents the idea of turning your brain off and consuming big explosions and dumb action than Uncharted 3. The action here is non-stop, and neither player nor Nate has more than a few seconds to breathe between set pieces, and I'd even argue that so much of the game is high octane that it all blends together. No greater proof of this is seen than in my review of the game. I was talking about the set pieces, and many noted that I did not bring up the scene where you traverse a cruise ship and escape from it as it comes crashing down. This was not because it wasn't special, but because there is so much going on and the game is sensory overload for so much of its runtime that I genuinely forgot about it. It got lost in the gray. It doesn't stop the set pieces from being fun, and something that elevates these moments is the gameplay, which is as tight and fun as ever. Aiming offers and rewards more precision. Combat has overhauls to make it more viable and mechanically deep, and the additions to the stealth give the gameplay some severely needed variety. The only real weak point of Drake's Deception is the story, which is by far one of the most forgettable in the series despite being the most ambitious. It tries to tell the origin story of Drake, and while the change up in characters, scenery, and time is nice, the story feels meandering for most of it, and this isn't even looking into the many plot holes and loose ends that went untied. I had also stated in my Uncharted 3 review that the gameplay is better than Uncharted 2, which I stand by. Enemy variety is better and the contexts in which you shoot are more varied, but the reason Drake's Deception is still below falls down to the many points in which aspects of the game bring down the entire package. Uncharted 2, for comparison's sake, has a story that is fine. It's nothing special, but most of it works. Uncharted 3 has a story so lackluster that it ends up bringing down the entire product. The final levels when entering the fantastical Atlantis of the Sands are hampered by the enemies that have unreasonable health and the ability to teleport, making the tail end of the game dreadful. Puzzles, much like 2, were not anything special, but are a significant step up from Drake's fortune. The revamped hand-to-hand combat is appreciated and the actual silenced pistol offers replayability, but ultimately Uncharted 3 does not hold up as well in memory as the number 3 spot. I should also mention that with all of these games, I don't think any of them are bad. In fact, everything from this point would be considered great, but it doesn't stop some from being better than others. Speaking of which, number 3, Uncharted 2, Among Thieves. Now, I know this is a bit of a hot take, but let's be real, this game has the slightest gallon of rose tint spilled over it, and this list would be boring as hell if Uncharted 2 was the best. That's not to say I'll change my opinion for the sake of being different or interesting. The first 3 spots thus far disprove that, as those takes are fucking lukewarm, but rather, let me cook. Uncharted 2 is a game that, like Uncharted 3, has aged surprisingly well. Shooting feels decent, the story isn't the best, but has countless memorable moments and set pieces, and the variety in gameplay is enough to make any consecutive playthrough still enjoyable. I also hold this game in high regard because it was one of the first games I played that felt next-gen to me. This game blew my socks off when I first played it, and the very first thing I did once I finished it was start another playthrough. In recent years, when attempting to set my biases aside, I found that Uncharted 2 does not hold up as well as I once thought. The game is still exceptional and has aged very well, but when those rose-tinted goggles come off, cracks begin to form, never progressing to fractures though. The gunplay feels better than Uncharted 1, but still feels lacking in the accuracy department. Aiming feels more responsive, sure, but every gun has such a wide bullet spread that precision isn't rewarded. You can aim perfectly at the head, and bullets will practically bend around the enemy, making harder difficulties more luck-based than it needed to be. Boss fights were also relatively boring, and in some cases brutally difficult, but it was at least better than previous attempts. In fact, that's where a lot of Uncharted 2's strengths lie. As a sequel, Uncharted 2 is among the best. The shooting feels better, combat is better, set pieces are crazier and more memorable, the pacing is more consistent, the dialogue is funnier, the secrets are more enticing, the environments are more diverse and detailed. Everything here is a step above its predecessor. Even as I write this, there are few moments in Uncharted 2 that I didn't enjoy, and the only downsides this game has are in respect to their sequels. Uncharted 2 has little focus on stealth, something later games would remedy, so coming back feels a bit restrictive, especially when the only silent weapon has a considerably short range and clip size. I believe that the next 2 entries are better, as their improvements to choice within gameplay make them far kinder to retrospective playthroughs. The soundtrack seemed to have been amped up with everything else, and the presentation comes together to make the game feel like the big budget blockbuster it is attempting to imitate. The story this time around was more fun, and the opening on the train solidifies intrigue from the moment you boot the game. Characters like Chloe and Elena bounce dialogue off each other almost as well as they bounce insults off of Drake, and your companions in gameplay never let a dull moment go by. Uncharted 2 is a classic, no matter which way you slice it, but I just so happen to enjoy the newer games more. It's funny, Uncharted 2 is such a difficult game to talk about in depth because the game is just good. Everything that matters is done with competent competence and grace, and the only criticisms I have towards the game, outside of the bullet spread criticism, is relatively meaningless. Among Thieves is truly a game more efficiently evaluated by stating what few things are wrong rather than spending an eternity talking about what it does right. If the Uncharted series ended at 3, then 2 would still be the absolute best in the series, but fortunately, that was not the case. Number 2, Uncharted Lost Legacy. Deciding between this game and Uncharted 4 was genuinely a challenge, because while Uncharted 4 had a great story and felt like it was a beautiful send-off for Nathan Drake, the gameplay was better in Lost Legacy. If Lost Legacy was longer and had more room to develop its characters and properly wrap up the loose ends left by Nathan, then it would easily be the best. But I think Uncharted 4 is a better overall product. Regardless, Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy are leagues above the trilogy gameplay-wise. Climbing is more realistic, combat is just as good, gunplay is as tight as ever, and in Lost Legacy's case, the stealth is as fun as it gets. While previous Uncharted games let you merely thin the numbers in stealth, Uncharted 4 let you complete entire encounters in stealth. But there was a problem. Silenced weapons were extremely rare. Lost Legacy remedied this in an interesting way. Not by simply putting a silenced weapon in, but adding just a pistol, and with a limited number of bullets. This means you have only a few enemies that can be taken out silently at a medium range, but most enemies will still need to be taken out by hand. This makes stealth far more engaging and adds replay value. Once in combat, things are the same as Uncharted 4, but that's no insult, as A Thief's End presents the most dynamic and vertical combat, all thanks to the rope swing introduced in A Thief's End. Something else teased in 4 was the open-ended areas. This was expanded upon further to where up to a third of the game takes place in the relatively open Western Ghats. Yes, it is still rather linear in that the space acts as a central hub with multiple branching paths, but compared to the strict near shooting gallery linearity of previous entries, this feels like a glimpse at an open world Uncharted, and one that works surprisingly well. I mentioned this in my video on the game, but Lost Legacy offers a glimpse into the future of Uncharted, and what the series could look like moving forward. When it comes to the gameplay, I think Lost Legacy should be the blueprint. Even the boss fights, while not being anything to write home about, were more enjoyable than the first 3 attempts, and were on the same level as the Wraith fight, opting for cinematic quality over mechanics. The story is, like basically every Uncharted game, lacking. But this game made an effort to respond to the criticisms of Uncharted 4, specifically with Nadine. She wasn't received very well in Uncharted 4, and this is no surprise as she was the villain, and Uncharted villains being one note is par for the course. But Nadine struck a nerve with quite a few people. Lost Legacy made a direct effort to develop Nadine more, and the same was done with Chloe, though she didn't really need any reworking. I think this turned out well, and seeing the two bond over the course of the game was rather touching. Their petty gossip over each other's past highlights one of Uncharted's strengths, which is its moment-to-moment dialogue. This has always benefited the stories, as while on the whole the plots are lackluster, their individual moments are enjoyable enough to entertain in motion. The story here follows a similar structure, though I think I'm in the minority for enjoying a SOV. Overall, Lost Legacy is a solid footnote or addendum to Uncharted 4. It addresses many criticisms of both the story and gameplay of Uncharted 4, and while it isn't long, I'd prefer a shorter experience over a drawn-out one. The puzzles here were also the best in the series hands down, but ultimately, it falls below the number 1 spot because it is disconnected from the rest of the series, and works as an epilogue. Whereas A Thief's End wrapped up the themes and ideas of 3 different games, while also overhauling everything from the presentation to the story and the gameplay. Number 1, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. I'm sure many of you saw this coming. My video on Uncharted 4 was a glowing one, and rightfully so. Uncharted 4, especially off the back of the Nathan Drake trilogy, is a colossal improvement in every area. The rope swing is a simple, albeit predictable addition, as every game from 2014 to 2016 had a grappling hook or rope swing of some sort, but it makes the combat so much better. Nothing will ever be as satisfying as swinging from the top of the map onto some unsuspecting guard below. And when in those fights, Uncharted 4 had AI that, while not groundbreaking, kept things interesting, and your partners aided you more than in previous entries. In stealth, they began pointing out where enemies are, and they can actually kill some of them in combat. The shooting was tighter, movement more accurate, and the stealth is where we saw the largest leap in quality. The stealth here features proper takedowns from cover, bushes, and the air, and in many cases it felt better to take the quieter route, and some scenarios could be skipped entirely. It made sense for someone like Nathan to begin playing a bit smarter given that he isn't getting any younger, and now that he has something to lose, being Elena. All of this is presented on a crisp, next-gen backdrop that to this day looks good. The Uncharted games have never struggled with graphics or realism, at least fidelity-wise, but A Thief's End feels like a true step up in that you can see characters' pores on their faces, and some scenes and ideas are entirely communicated through facial expressions. Few games can use a character's subtle facial movements to communicate full sentences, and it elevates the cutscenes in this game to new heights. But Uncharted 4's biggest strength, and at times biggest weakness, is its story, which had the highest ambitions of the series. Why is this? Because there's an actual story here. While the first 3 Uncharted games had enjoyable characters and moments, the overall story was relatively simple. This worked for those wanting a cheesy action flick in video game form, but time after time there were those asking for more. Uncharted 4 delivered that, and that is why it is so beloved, because there's so much to love. But there's also more to dislike. Look no further than Nadine, who was the center of many discussions discussions, and her rather polarizing reception is still something that puzzles me, but it also illustrates something interesting about A Thief's End. In my research, I found that many loved Uncharted 4, but there was an undismissible group of those that didn't like it, which was larger than previous entries. As I'm sure you can assume, I'm part of the group that loved it, but that doesn't mean this game didn't have some problems, and unfortunately, these problems are ones we have seen from the first entry. Since we've already brought up Nadine, we can also look at Wraith, who like every Uncharted villain up to this point was poorly developed and lacked a proper threat. Fortunately, other characters like Drake and Elena are given more depth than ever before, and the game explores their obsession with treasure hunting and adventure far more than Uncharted 3 even attempted to. The story is portrayed in gameplay, and themes like Nathan trying to live a normal life while fantasizing of a life of adventure is reflected in the player because much of the opening is rather mundane and sees Nathan out of the action. The puzzles were, well, puzzles this time around, asking the player to consistently use their brain. While none were puzzles I'd be stuck on, they induced a few head scratches that were leagues above the puzzles in previous games, which were often not worthy of being called such. Uncharted 4 is Naughty Dog and Nathan Drake at their best. It's a game that thrives in the legacy of Nathan Drake, and wraps up his story perfectly, while also leaving enough loose ends for future games to tie up. I mentioned this in my Lost Legacy video a lot, but I really don't like the idea of getting a new Uncharted, be that a reboot or a sequel involving Drake. Lost Legacy is an exception because it explains what most of the characters are getting up to without Drake, which is to no one's surprise, the same old shenanigans. But as is the sentiment with these ranking videos, I hope this is the last we see of Nathan Drake. The rumors surrounding Uncharted's reboot are troubling because it's so easy to see a heartless reboot that might be good, but feel uncanny compared to the originals. The 6 Uncharted games we have are all well made, not without flaws, but widely loved. So why do we need to continue to milk it? Well, I know the answer, you know the answer. Money. But I'm still holding out hope that the most we get are the first 3 Uncharted games on PC, and then Nathan Drake can be given some proper time out of the spotlight, only to be inevitably picked up later by developers that are in it for the passion. In fact, Nathan Drake could easily be replaced. When Tomb Raider was out of the spotlight, Uncharted scratched that itch. And now that both Uncharted and Tomb Raider haven't seen a release in years, I would love to see a new IP that carries the spirit of these games with them. But no matter the reboot or replacement, nothing will change how special the Uncharted games are to me. It was the first series of games that changed my views on what a game could be. Growing up, the games I played were mostly fantasy games or ones with turn-based combat, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Uncharted was the first game I played to present a high-budget action that, at least for the time, looked as close to real life as I could see. From Project Big to A Thief's End, Uncharted was oozing with greatness, even in its small beginnings. And while corporate greed might take away the nice bow placed at the end of Nathan's story, they can't take away what the first 6 games achieved. So now that we've discussed where I rank the games, I will also do my best to rank some other aspects of the series, but I won't be going into any depth. Top 5 characters. Number 5, Sam. Number 4, Chloe. Number 3, Elena. Number 2, Sully. And number 1, Nathan. Top 5 boss fights. Number 5, Navarro. Number 4, Lazarevich. Number 3, Talbot. Number 2, Asav. Number 1, Wraith. Top 5 chapters. Number 5, Uncharted 2, Chapter 6. Number 4, Uncharted 3, Chapter 2. Number 3, Uncharted 4, Chapter 11. Number 2, Uncharted 2, Chapter 13. And number 1, Uncharted Lost Legacy, Chapter 4. Top 5 villains in no particular order because they all kind of suck. Nadine, Wraith, Lazarevich, Asav, Flynn, but fuck you guys, honestly. And that is about everything I have to say about the Uncharted series. My full thoughts are out there, and if you've watched all of this, then thank you for your support. The Uncharted games are so special to me, and it's been a joy to revisit these games and ultimately come to the conclusion that many of them have aged rather well. If there are any new Uncharted games, I'll be sure to cover them, even if I hope it doesn't happen. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me on this retrospective look at the series. If you have any further questions for me, then leave it below, and I'll try to get back to as many as I can. Stay safe, and take care. Hello everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, you can leave a like and subscribe for more. I want to thank our patrons who are currently on screen right now. Thank you for your support. It truly means a lot to me and it helps me out. If you want to get access to these videos, sometimes like a week early, sometimes less, sometimes more, and some other benefits, you can go check out the Patreon page in the description. What you can also check out in the description is my Twitter page and my TikTok page where I post semi-frequently on both of those. I just wanted to level with you guys a little bit regarding the last few videos. Just over the last 6 months, I feel like I have become directionless, barring this video and parts of the Lost Legacy video. I feel like the videos I've made have been good, but I think I'm getting bogged down by insecurities in my videos. I get too worked up over, comments saying, your voice is annoying, or you need to write better, or this is edited badly or whatever. And I think I just started trying so hard to please everyone that I started making videos that were less what I would actually do and more what do I think, what's the general public's opinion of a good video essay. And that even ranged to like my more subdued voiceover, which maybe it did sound better, I don't know, but it didn't feel like me, and it kind of drained the fun out of it. Like when I'm sitting here letting my thoughts splatter the page with a fucking pen inked in insecurity, and it's just leading me to a video that's the embodiment of not even me, but like my fears. And it feels like every video is an attempt to feel good enough, and I don't think that's healthy. It's certainly not as fun. And I realized that when I made the Fortnite video, because I made that Fortnite video and I was like, okay, this is going to be an April Fool's kind of gag video. I'm not going to take it seriously. Nobody else will. I can go balls to the wall. And that ended up being one of my best videos in a long time. And I think it's because I had nothing to be afraid of. I was like, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to do me. And because I had the plan of if the video is bad, then I'll just say it's an April Fool's joke. And it ended up being really good. As of writing this, I mean, the video hasn't performed great, but God, I had so much fun making that video, and I haven't felt like that in a few months. And I think I've realized that that's my issue, is that I keep trying to, because I always want to improve. I want to get better at this. And when you guys give me constructive feedback, I want to take it to heart. And I listen to you guys. I want to be one of those, I don't want to be one of those creators that just ignores the very people that put them in the very privileged position that they are. But at the same time, I need to start separating myself a bit more and just saying things like, yeah, maybe my voice is annoying, but I'm not going to change it. I can't change it. I'm stuck with this shit, man. If you don't like it, there's nothing I can do for you. And things like, yeah, I'm going to try and improve my writing as much as I can, but at the same time, I got to just do what I like the most. Everyone's tastes are different, and I need to rely on my own tastes because that is what I'm going to have the most fun making. No offense, I'm not always going to enjoy making what Joe down the street thinks is a great video essay, but I'm always going to enjoy creating what I think is a great video. And so that's my spiel. Thank you for listening to that. And so with that said, the following scripts I hope are going to be a lot better, and I hope the videos are going to be a lot better too. And I think they're going to be more fun because I've been having a lot more fun making them. And I think there's a direct correlation. I think that's common knowledge, but I'm being reassured that there's a direct correlation. So thank you for your support as always. I know I say it a lot, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care of yourselves. I love you guys. Stay safe. Bye.